You know, um, Usually when we talk about receiving a medical diagnosis, there is a very specific, deeply comforting expectation of absolute precision.
Right. It's almost like engineering in a way.
Exactly. I mean, you fall off a bike, your arm hurts, you go to the hospital, and the doctor puts you in front of an x-ray machine.
And that machine produces a film, and right there on the glowing screen is just, well, it's a jagged white line across the radius bone.
Yeah, and the doctor just points to it and says, there is the problem. Broken.
It's entirely binary. The ambiguity is just completely removed from the equation.
Broken or not broken. It's
Yeah.
clean, it's objective, and most importantly, it tells you exactly what to do next. You just put a cast on it.
Right. The solution is built into the diagnosis.
But then you take a step into the world of human behavior. You
Yep.
start looking at neurodevelopment or executive function, or even just the seemingly simple act of how we manage our physical spaces.
Oh, and our internal expectations, too.
Yeah, totally. And suddenly, that metaphorical x-ray machine doesn't just look broken. It looks like it was built for a completely different universe.
It really does.
We find ourselves staring at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky, full of contradictions, and honestly, kind of maddening.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And, the water gets the muddiest, the most opaque when we start looking at a very specific demographic.
Which is?
The paradox of the highly capable person. I mean, we aren't talking about individuals who lack drive or intelligence here.
Right.
We are talking about people who excel in almost every other area of their lives, yet they fundamentally fail at the baseline maintenance of their immediate surroundings.
Which is the core contradiction we are tearing apart in our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're looking at a question that haunts so many people. Why do incredibly smart, brilliantly creative, and undeniably capable people often live in shockingly messy homes?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
We're talking about, the CEO whose car looks like a landfill, or the brilliant graphic designer whose dining room table hasn't been visible since 2019 because it's just buried under mail and half-finished projects.
It really breaks all of our standard culturally ingrained models of success and discipline.
It totally does.
We are taught that discipline is a monolith. If you have the discipline to get a master's degree or run a successful business, you should inherently possess the discipline to fold your laundry.
Right, like at the package deal.
Exactly. But human cognition just doesn't operate on a single universal sliding scale of discipline.
No, it certainly doesn't. And if you are listening to this right now, maybe you are staring at a mountain of laundry on the chair in your bedroom that has basically become a permanent piece of furniture.
The laundry chair. Everyone knows the laundry chair.
Oh, absolutely. Or maybe you are just someone who is endlessly fascinated by the weird, self-sabotaging tricks our brains play on us. Either way, this deep dive is custom tailored for you.
We are working from an incredibly candid source document today.
Yes, it's brutally honest and wonderfully funny. It's titled Reality Check, and then the subtitle is Giving Up Fantasy. It's written by Dana K. White, the creator of the massively popular blog called A Slob Comes Clean.
And what makes this source material so compelling is that it bypasses the traditional sterile tone of an organizational manual.
Thank goodness.
Right. We aren't going to be discussing the optimal way to fold a fitted sheet or, which vinegar solution is best for granite countertops.
I mean, I still don't know how to fold a fitted sheet, but
Nobody does. But instead, we are analyzing an intensely personal journey of what the author calls deslobification, but we're looking at it through a rigorous psychological lens.
because it's not actually about the countertops, is it?
Not at all. It's about cognitive dissonance. We are exploring the profound, often painful gap between our idealized selves, the fantasy versions of who we truly believe we are destined to be, and our everyday boots-on-the-ground reality. The core thesis here is that our refusal to give up on our fantasies, our clinging to the idea of a perfect future self, is ironically the primary mechanism preventing us from achieving actual sustainable success in the present.
I love that. So I want you, the listener, to try something for a second. Think about your own personal equivalent of that messy kitchen, the thing you know you should be able to manage, but somehow just can't.
Everyone has one.
Yeah, maybe it is your physical kitchen. Maybe it's your overflowing, terrifying email inbox that you just declare bankruptcy on every 6 months.
Oh, the email bankruptcy is so real.
It is. Or maybe it's that guest room that is slowly morphed into a storage unit for good intentions. We are going to connect those everyday infuriating frustrations directly to the mechanics of how your brain processes tasks, identity, and perfectionism.
So let's look at way this author argues the foundational programming for this delusion begins. She points the finger squarely at fairy tales.
It's a brilliant metaphorical starting point.
It really is, because it addresses our earliest conditioning regarding domestic labor and the whole concept of a happily ever after.
Right. She points out this wild detail that I'd never really registered before. In almost every classic fairy tale we grow up consuming, someone is cleaning.
Always.
Think about Cinderella scrubbing the stone floors, or Snow White breaking into a house and immediately sweeping up for 7 strangers. I mean, the princesses are always doing heavy housework.
But the media portrays it in this bizarre, sanitized way.
Yes, they make it look joyful. They are singing. They are dancing with woodland creatures. The dust never seems to make them cough or sneeze.
It's a very curated aesthetic.
But here is the absolute most crucial detail of the fantasy: they only clean before they reach their destiny.
The cleaning is purely a temporary state of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It is a cinematic device used to show their humility and their worthiness.
Right.
But observe what happens once the prince arrives, or the curse is broken, or the ultimate destiny is achieved. The cleaning magically completely stops. Or rather, it just vanishes from the narrative entirely.
Nobody is talking about who is scrubbing the castle toilets. Cinderella isn't stressing about the mopping schedule.
Exactly. And the subconscious conditioning here is immensely powerful. We internalize this idea that once we reach our arrival point in life, whatever that destiny looks like for us, the mundane struggles will simply evaporate.
Like flipping a switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The house will just exist in a state of perpetual, effortless perfection.
And the author admits that, logically, as a grown woman, she obviously knew life wasn't a literal Disney movie. She knew birds weren't going to fly through her window and fold her laundry.
Right. Intellectually, she understood that.
But emotionally,
Uh-huh.
subconsciously, when it came to housekeeping, she fully, 100% embraced this delusion.
It's fascinating.
She had this deep-seated, irrational confidence that one day cleaning would just become easy. She literally thought she would just arrive at her grown-up, on the mama phase of life, buy a house, and the mess would just magically cease to exist because she had reached her destination.
It's the someday syndrome. You know, someday when I'm a real adult, I'll just be the kind of person who naturally puts things away.
Yeah.
But the reality she paints of her life leading up to that point is a stark contradiction to that fantasy.
Oh, her personal history of mess is an incredible escalation. She doesn't hide anything. She walks us through it step by step.
It's very brave of her.
It is. It started with a messy room as a child. Normal enough, right? But then it became a disastrously messy desk in elementary school. Then an overflowing, unusable locker in high school.
It just keeps building.
Then a college dorm room that was legendary for its chaos. And she dropped this fantastic detail. Her college friends were theater kids, actors.
Okay, and that is a demographic not exactly renowned for their rigid type A organizational skills.
Exactly. And yet, even these theater kids were so visually shocked by the state of her dorm room that they physically couldn't hide the horror on their faces when they walked in.
Wow. So she describes a level of environmental degradation that goes far beyond just leaving a few books out. She's talking about the kind of clutter where the floor ceases to function as a floor.
She talks about moments of just completely giving up, resorting to eating all her meals off paper plates and drinking out of flimsy disposable cups strictly to avoid interacting with the kitchen.
And yet somehow the kitchen sink is still 99.9% full of rotting, dirty dishes.
Yes. She even admits to this deeply relatable yet absurd behavior. If someone stopped by her house unexpectedly in the middle of a freezing, bitter winter, she would step outside onto the porch without a coat.
Oh my gosh.
She would pretend she just passionately loved talking in the freezing cold, purely to physically block them from coming inside and seeing the disaster.
Lengths we go to.
Or, my personal favorite, she claims she once told people a massive, immovable pile of junk on her floor was the reason she had a broken toe.
Wait, really?
Yes, because it was easier to blame the pile than admit she had tripped over her own mess.
What we are observing in those anecdotes is not just a lack of organization, it's the extreme, exhausting psychological lengths a person will go to in order to protect their internal fantasy from external reality.
That's exactly it.
She was desperately waiting for the day she achieved her ultimate life goal of being a stay-at-home mom. She truly believed that once she reached that specific destination, the fairy tale logic would finally activate.
But it didn't.
No. The reality, of course, was that she got the house, she had the time, she had the kids, and the environment was still an absolute disaster. The external circumstances changed, but the internal mechanics didn't.
Which brings us to the breaking point. It's 2009. She is in a moment of absolute rock-bottom desperation, and she decides to create an anonymous blog to hold herself accountable.
A huge step.
And she titles it using a word that she admits she deeply, viscerally hates. She calls it "A Slob Comes Clean."
Right.
Now, I need to stop right here and push back on this, because I really want to challenge this idea.
Okay, let's unpack this.
We live in an era where we place a massive emphasis on mental health, on positive self-talk, on giving ourselves grace. Slob is a slur. It's a derogatory, shameful word.
Yes.
She even writes in the text that it's an insult. It's not a word you would ever use to describe a friend. So is it really healthy or even productive to label yourself with such a harsh, negative term?
That's a fair question.
Doesn't internalizing a moral judgment like slob just destroy your motivation? Doesn't it sound like toxic self-flagellation?
That is a very valid critique, and it cuts to the heart of the psychology of radical acceptance versus toxic shame. To understand why this harsh label was actually the key to her liberation, let's go back to your medical analogy from the very beginning of the show.
Okay, the broken arm and the x-ray.
Yes. Think about the emotional experience of receiving a severe medical diagnosis, say a chronic condition. Nobody wants to hear those words. It is painful, it is scary, and your initial instinct is often denial.
Totally. You just want to believe it's a temporary ache.
But until you accept the brutal reality of what the x-ray shows, what are you going to do? You are going to keep treating a broken arm with cough syrup.
Wow. Yeah.
You are going to apply pleasant, gentle, completely ineffective solutions because you are refusing to name the actual underlying trauma.
Okay, I see the logic there, but, well, a broken arm is an objective medical fact. Slob is a subjective moral judgment. If I say I have a broken arm, I am stating a fact. If I say I am a slob, aren't I just telling myself I am a fundamentally broken person?
There is a crucial distinction between shame and surrender. Shame says, I am a bad person because I cannot do this. Surrender says, the standard tools I have been handed do not work on my specific machinery.
Oh, I like that distinction.
By claiming the absolute worst possible label, the one she feared the most, she actually stripped the word of its power to shame her. She neutralized the threat.
So by saying it first, no one else could use it against her.
Exactly. As long as she was telling herself, I'm just a highly capable person who is currently having a disorganized week, or I'm just a little cluttered right now, she was preserving the fairy tale. She was leaving an escape hatch for her ego.
She was sugarcoating the reality so she didn't have to face the severity of the malfunction.
Precisely. Slob burned the escape hatch. It killed the fantasy. It was the harsh, stringent medicine she needed to clear away the delusions.
That makes so much sense.
Once she accepted the label, she eliminated her ability to make excuses. And the psychological relief of finally shedding a false identity, even if it means adopting an initially painful one, is immense. It allows you to stop pretending and start problem solving from a baseline of truth.
And the proof that this radical acceptance works is what happened the moment she put that word out into the world. When she started writing this blog, she didn't get hate mail.
No, she didn't.
She found this massive, immediate community. Women from all over the world were reading her anonymous confessions, and they weren't disgusted. They were crying with relief. They were thanking her for finally saying the quiet part out loud.
And look very closely at the demographic of the women who form this community. The author makes a profound observation that completely recontextualizes the issue.
Which is?
She realized her readers were not lazy people. They were artists. They were published poets. They were dedicated teachers, talented musicians, successful entrepreneurs. They were highly intelligent, deeply creative individuals.
Which pulls us right back to our opening paradox. Why are the smart, creative people the ones living in the chaotic, messy houses?
To understand that, we have to look at the neuroscience of cognition. We start to see a very clear link between the slob part of the brain and the creative part of the brain. Highly creative people often excel at what psychologists call divergent thinking.
Okay, let's slow down and define that. What exactly is divergent thinking in this context?
Divergent thinking is the ability to take a single starting point and explode it outward into infinite possibilities. It's lateral nonlinear thought.
Okay.
If I hand a divergent thinker a brick and ask, what can you do with this? They won't just say build a wall.
What would they say?
They'll say you can grind it up to make red pigment for paint. You can use it as a thermal mass to heat a small greenhouse. You can carve it into a sculpture.
That's amazing.
They see the big picture, they make unexpected connections, and they thrive on novelty. This is the exact cognitive profile of a brilliant artist or an empathetic, dynamic teacher.
Okay, that sounds like a superpower. So where does the short circuit happen when they walk into a messy kitchen?
The short circuit happens because traditional mainstream organizational advice is built entirely on the opposite cognitive process, convergent thinking.
Convergent thinking.
Yes, convergent thinking is the ability to take a multitude of data points and funnel them down into a single, correct, linear answer. Math is convergent. And standard cleaning advice, the kind that dictates sort item A into bin B, apply label C, and do this at exactly 9 a.m. every Tuesday, is highly convergent. It is rigid. It is linear. It demands a single correct path.
Oh, wow. So the traditional advice, the best-selling books on how to organize your home, are quite literally written by people whose brains are wired fundamentally differently than the creative brain.
Exactly. The creative person reads the linear organizational manual, tries to force their divergent brain to operate in a convergent way, fails miserably, and then internalizes that failure as a moral defect.
They think they're broken.
They think they lack discipline. But the reality is the traits that make them exceptional at their art are the exact same traits that make following a rigid step-by-step cleaning schedule feel neurologically impossible.
That is so validating.
Accepting that your brain is simply wired differently is the ultimate liberation. It gives you permission to stop feeling like a failure when tools that weren't built for you don't work for you.
But, and this is where the source material takes a really sharp, brilliant turn, accepting that your brain is different is a wonderful first step, but it immediately forces you to confront the one specific demon that paralyzes the creative, divergent brain more than anything else.
The pursuit of perfection.
Yes. The author realizes that this age-old, culturally revered adage we've all had drilled into our heads since kindergarten, if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right, is actually a deeply toxic fantasy for someone with her brain type.
It's a huge trap.
She identifies herself not just as a slob, but as an idealist.
That is a fascinating juxtaposition. I mean, in common parlance, we rarely, if ever, pair the concept of a slob with the concept of an idealist.
Right, we tend to view them as polar opposites on the spectrum of human behavior. We assume a slob just doesn't care.
But she cares entirely too much.
Yes. Her desire to find the absolute, perfectly optimized, most efficient, very best way to do a chore is the exact mechanism preventing the chore from ever getting done in the first place.
How does she illustrate this?
She shares a story that is so revealing. She talks about working at a summer camp when she was 16 years old. She loved this job. She says she happily scrubbed camp bathrooms, literal public toilets, with a giant smile on her face.
Well, why is that?
Because at the camp, she was given a step-by-step, laminated checklist, and she had 2 full hours carved out of her day dedicated strictly and entirely to that one single task.
Okay.
And because she was so successful at it, her teenage brain formulated a theory: I am going to rock being a homemaker. If I can clean disgusting camp bathrooms perfectly, maintaining my own beautiful home someday will be an absolute breeze.
It's a classic error in cognitive forecasting. She is failing to factor in the complexity of the environmental context.
Exactly.
At that summer camp, cleaning the bathroom was her singular universe for those 2 hours. There were no interruptions, no crying toddlers, no overlapping deadlines. In reality, managing a household is an exercise in juggling a million competing variables simultaneously.
Right. And here's where it gets so wonderfully absurd. At that same camp, during a health and safety training seminar, she learned a scientific fact. It is technically more hygienic to let dishes air dry on a rack rather than wiping them dry with a towel.
Because of the bacteria on the towel.
Yes. The logic being that a damp towel can harbor and spread bacteria from dish to dish, whereas air drying is sterile. So she internalized that scientific fact. Now, fast forward a decade or so to her adulthood, living in her own house. What is her daily reality? She has massive baking sheets, bulky ceramic slow cooker inserts, giant plastic movie theater, refillable cups, just sitting on her kitchen counter air drying for days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months at a time.
Because her brain has latched onto the idea that, technically speaking, air drying is the very best way to complete the task of washing dishes.
Exactly. She is actively congratulating herself on being efficient and hygienic. She tells herself, I don't have to hunt down a clean towel. I don't have to spend the time drying these awkward items individually, and I don't have to put them away right now because they are currently engaged in the very important, scientifically sound process of air drying.
It is an incredibly sophisticated lie she is telling herself.
It's almost like, imagine you're driving home from work, right? and you decide you want to map out the absolute most geographically direct, geometrically straight line to your front door.
Okay, a straight line.
And it turns out that straight line involves stopping your car, turning off the engine, and parking it dead in the middle of a busy 6-lane highway. And you just leave it there.
Oh, wow.
Technically, yes, according to the map, that is the most direct route. But it completely dangerously ignores the reality of the environment you were actually living in.
That is a phenomenal analogy. It perfectly illustrates the absurdity of context-blind idealism. It's optimization devoid of reality.
It really is.
And what is most intriguing here is the psychological defense mechanism at play. Perfectionism in this specific context isn't about actually achieving a pristine, perfect house. It has mutated into a highly sophisticated, intellectually defensible form of procrastination.
How does perfectionism become procrastination? Walk me through that.
By waiting for the best way to do something, she is giving herself a morally superior excuse to take zero action.
Oh, I see.
If she says, "I'm just too lazy to put the slow cooker away," she feels guilt. But if she says, "I am adhering to the highest standards of hygiene by allowing it to air dry," she feels virtuous. The idealism shields her ego.
That is sneaky.
It is. But here is the critical flaw. The physical environment does not freeze in time while she waits for the perfect moment to finish the task. The text introduces a genuinely brilliant neurological concept here that she coins slob vision.
Oh, this part blew my mind.
Because she leaves those slow cooker parts and baking sheets out on the counter for weeks on end, her brain undergoes a process of visual habituation. In neuroscience, this is related to a concept called sensory gating.
Sensory gating.
Yes. The brain is constantly bombarded with billions of pieces of sensory data every second. To avoid short-circuiting, a part of the brain called the thalamus filters out redundant, unchanging stimuli to save metabolic energy.
Wait. So her brain is literally deciding to not see the mess to save calories.
Essentially, yes. If an object like a giant plastic cup sits in the exact same spot on the counter for work, the thalamus decides it is no longer a novel threat or a piece of actionable information.
That's wild.
It categorizes the cup as part of the permanent architecture of the kitchen, just like the refrigerator or the wall. The dishes literally blend into the landscape. Her brain stops registering them as objects that are out of place.
Which explains why she can just casually grab a dirty baking sheet from the massive pile, wash it, bake cookies on it, wash it again, and then put it right back on top of the exact same chaotic pile to air dry again.
Exactly.
She isn't seeing a pile of junk, she's just seeing her kitchen.
Correct. Until, as she describes it so vividly in the text, she is suddenly hit out of nowhere with this inexplicable despair.
Oh, yeah.
She starts feeling terrible, overwhelmed, and physically tense, but she doesn't immediately know why. And then she physically shakes her head, the sensory gating fails, the slob vision clears, and she suddenly truly sees the massive, chaotic, hoarding-level pile of junk that she has been functionally blind to for weeks.
She felt the mess with her nervous system before she consciously saw it with her eyes.
Yes.
That is wild. The idea that your brain just photoshops the mess out of your reality to protect you from the visual noise. I want you, the listener, to try something right now. Look up from whatever you are doing. Scan the room you are in.
Just take a look around.
Look at the corners. Look at the surfaces. What is your brain photoshopped out? What stack of mail or pile of shoes or half-empty water bottle has been sitting there so long that it has simply become part of the architecture?
Everyone has something.
Because that paralyzing idealism, combined with this sensory blindness, creates this horrible escalating negative feedback loop.
The feedback loop is where the real damage is done.
Yeah.
The author provides a perfect, grounded example of this involving cleaning a toilet.
Yes, she admits she would fret and stress for weeks over finding the absolute most perfectly, environmentally friendly, organic, non-toxic way to clean her bathroom.
Right.
She reads articles about off-gassing and harsh chemicals, and she genuinely worries that using a standard cleaner will ruin her children's developing immune systems. She is paralyzed by the desire to do it perfectly safely.
And what is the result of that noble idealism?
She delays.
And while she is paralyzed by research, the physical reality of the bathroom continues to decay. The toilet gets dirtier, bacteria multiplies, it gets grosser and infinitely more unsanitary.
Exactly, until finally the crisis hits.
All right.
Her mother-in-law or a friend is coming over in 10 minutes. The toilet is now practically a biohazard, and she panics.
Of course.
She abandons all of her organic research, dives under the sink, and is forced to grab the harshest, most terrifyingly toxic, industrial-strength chemical bleach she owns just to blast through the accumulated grime in a 5-minute panic.
So her pursuit of the absolute perfect, non-toxic solution ironically forced her into a corner where the only viable option left was the worst possible, most toxic outcome.
It is the ultimate tragic trap of the idealist. Seeking the perfect solution creates a manufactured crisis, and that crisis demands the most extreme, imperfect solution.
It's a vicious cycle. And what's terrifying is that this trap doesn't just apply to things we hate doing, like daily chores or scrubbing toilets.
No, it doesn't.
This idealistic trap scales up. It infects how the creative brain handles the things it actually wants to do, the big ideas, the side projects, which takes us into the next major theme of the text, the paralysis of the woulda, coulda, shoulda mindset.
Yes. The author develops a very effective strategy here. She learns to identify a specific set of red flags in her own internal monologue. She calls them signal words.
What are the words?
The words are would, could, and should. When she hears those words pop up in her thoughts, I could do this, I should save that, she now recognizes them as an absolute ironclad guarantee that a task is never, ever going to happen. And she gives us what might be the ultimate example of things that will never happen. I love this story so much because it is so painfully relatable.
The toilet paper rolls.
Yes. She reads a tip online on a frugal living blog that people on eBay will actually buy empty toilet paper rolls. Crafters use them, apparently. They pay something like $5 to $15 for a box of 50 or 100 clean, empty cardboard tubes.
The premise itself is a perfect, irresistible magnet for the divergent, idealist brain. It combines resourcefulness, financial gain, and a touch of unconventional problem solving.
It's free money, literally pulling cash out of the trash. She uses toilet paper every day, so her brain immediately shifts into overdrive.
Naturally.
She thinks, I could easily save those. I should totally do this. Think of the extra money we would make over a year. And she genuinely wants us, the reader, to play this scenario out in her actual physical reality.
Okay, let's play it out.
She imagines putting a handy-dandy, aesthetically pleasing collection box inside the bathroom cabinet. She imagines calling a family meeting, standing in front of her bewildered husband and young children, and enthusiastically announcing that they are officially going into the used toilet paper roll export business.
It is a plan completely overflowing with optimistic intent, but it is utterly devoid of logistical realism.
Right. Let's look at the two ways this actually plays out.
Mm-hmm.
Scenario A, 3 weeks later, she opens the bathroom cabinet, sees a random cardboard box taking up space, and gets furious. Who put this trash box in here?
You forgot.
She has already completely forgotten the grand entrepreneurial plan. Or, scenario B, the alternate timeline, the family actually complies. They get excited, they diligently save the rolls.
And then what?
The boxes overflow. They tumble out of the cabinet every time you reach for toothpaste. They successfully collect hundreds of cardboard tubes.
And then they hit the wall, the execution phase.
Yes. Now, the fantasy requires labor. She has to find a digital camera. She has to arrange the tubes and photograph them in flaring light. She needs to source a shipping box that perfectly fits exactly 100 cardboard tubes without crushing them in transit.
Which is not easy.
She has to calculate shipping costs. And, well, she realizes she can't remember her eBay password.
Ah, the password, the ultimate roadblock.
So her brain does what it does best. It defers. She decides, I'll solve all these annoying little problems later, on a weekend when I have more time and mental energy.
Months go by. The bathroom cabinet is completely unusable because it is stuffed to the brim with literal cardboard trash.
Now, I know you well enough to know that you're going to want to play devil's advocate here.
Oh, I am. I absolutely am. Because a big part of me is listening to this story and thinking, wait a minute. Isn't recycling fundamentally good?
Isn't having a side hustle or finding clever ways to optimize our resources inherently a positive, admirable trait? Why shouldn't we try to turn our trash into cash? Throwing those rolls away almost feels like giving up. It feels wasteful, like we are failing to maximize our potential in the world.
And that voice you're channeling right there, that is exactly the voice of the toxic idealist.
Really?
Yes. It sounds perfectly reasonable, but if we break down the mechanics of the situation, we see exactly why this type of optimization is a catastrophic trap for this specific personality type.
Okay, break it down for me.
For someone who already struggles with baseline organization for a slob, to use her accepted term, there has to be a primary directive, an absolute unbreakable golden rule, and that rule must be Do absolutely nothing that makes the home harder to maintain.
Do nothing that makes the home harder to maintain. Okay, let's test the toilet paper rolls against that rule.
Let's analyze the hidden cognitive load and the friction cost of this great idea. Storing toilet paper rolls isn't just about finding a place for cardboard. It requires dedicated physical real estate in a bathroom that is likely already cluttered.
True.
Every time she opens that cabinet, her brain has to process the visual noise of the boxes. It requires constant mental tracking. Are we saving these? How many do we have?
That's exhausting.
It requires behavioral compliance and enforcement from 4 other human beings. And then it requires a massive execution, cost staging, photography, listing, customer service, shipping logistics, and password recovery.
The cost is huge.
The friction caused the amount of physical and mental energy required to execute this plan completely overwhelmingly bankrupts the theoretical $15 reward.
It's an illusion of productivity.
Yeah.
She is bankrupting her mental energy for pennies while her actual living space becomes less functional.
Precisely. In psychology, there is a concept called the Zeigarnik effect.
Oh, what's that?
It states that people remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed tasks. Every time she sees those roles, it is an open loop in her brain. It drains her executive function.
Wow.
I'd ask you, the listener, to pause again and consider this in your own life. What are your empty toilet paper rolls?
Ouch.
What are the aspirational projects, the half-finished side hustles, the optimization schemes that you are currently hoarding in your mental or physical space?
That's a tough question.
Often these are not signs of ambition. They are just highly organized, socially acceptable forms of clutter. It takes profound, painful self-awareness to look at a genuinely good, viable idea, like making money on eBay, or restoring an old piece of furniture, or learning a new language and be able to say out loud, that is a really cool idea for someone else, but it is absolutely not reality for me, given my current capacity.
That is such a tough pill to swallow. Admitting that you simply do not have the capacity to execute a good idea, it feels like a small death of the ego.
It really does.
Because when the idealistic side projects fail, and when the very best ways to do chores blow up in our faces and leave us with a biohazard toilet, the creative mind rarely just surrenders. It doesn't accept defeat.
No, it pivots.
Exactly. It pivots to a brand new fantasy. Which brings us to the next massive realization in the text, the myth of the elusive method.
This is perhaps the most pervasive, culturally reinforced fantasy in our modern, hyper-optimized society.
It really is. The author introduces the biggest, most deeply held housekeeping dream she finally had to forcefully abandon the belief that she just needed to find the right method.
The silver bullet.
This is the intoxicating fantasy that if she could just find the perfect organizational system, the perfect color-coded planner, the perfect digital app, her house would suddenly be clean forever, practically on autopilot.
It is the desperate search for the external savior.
And to address this, she delivers what is probably the harshest, most brilliantly honest truth in the entire text. She says, essentially, you can read this book I've written, you can read it 5 times in a row from cover to cover. You can highlight it, you can take notes, and your house will not be one single bit cleaner than it was before you opened page 1.
Wow.
Why? Because methods do not clean your house. Books do not clean your house. You have to clean your house. Your hands have to do the physical work.
It is shockingly direct, almost confrontational, but necessarily so.
I love the brutal honesty of an author explicitly telling her own readers that the act of reading her writing is not a substitute for action.
It's refreshing.
It makes me think of someone who is desperately trying to get in shape. Imagine a person going out and spending $1,000 buying 5 different state-of-the-art biometric fitness trackers.
Oh, I've seen this happen.
They subscribe to all the elite fitness podcasts. They buy 3 different heavy encyclopedias on the biomechanics of Olympic weightlifting.
All right.
But they do all of this reading and researching while sitting horizontally on their couch eating a bag of chips.
Right.
And then after a month, they genuinely wonder why their bench press isn't going up. The data tracking isn't the lifting. The map is not the territory.
That is spot on. And what is so fascinating here is the psychological safety net that these methods provide for the ego.
How so?
When the author relies on a method, when she puts her faith in a new binder or a new chore chart, she is effectively externalizing the responsibility for her environment. If she fails, she doesn't have to face her own internal habits. He can simply blame the tool.
Oh, it's not my fault. The house is a mess. The color-coded binder system was just too rigid for my lifestyle. It failed me.
Exactly. So she throws the method away, absolves herself of guilt, and then gets to experience the massive dopamine rush of searching for a new method.
A new planner, a new app, a trip to the office supply store.
Yes. And this creates a devastating, exhausting cycle of hope followed by inevitable failure.
It sounds exhausting.
Every time a new method is purchased, she feels hope. Every time it is discarded, it chips away at her foundational self-trust. Over years, this leads to deep cynicism and profound self-loathing because the brain slowly starts to believe, I am fundamentally broken, no system in the world works for me.
And let's extrapolate that for a second. Think about the modern internet landscape. We are absolutely drowning in productivity hacks, life-optimizing apps, aesthetic morning routine videos on TikTok showing people waking up at 4 a.m. to journal in perfect calligraphy.
Oh, the aesthetic routines.
It feels like this entire multi-billion-dollar industry is actually perfectly designed to feed this exact cycle of self-loathing.
It absolutely is. These tools and platforms hijack the brain's reward system. Neurologically speaking, researching a productivity app or buying a new planner triggers the exact same dopamine release in the brain as actually completing a difficult task.
Wait, really? The brain can't tell the difference.
The brain doesn't easily distinguish between preparing to do work and doing the work. It tricks you into feeling incredibly productive, energized, and accomplished while your actual physical environment continues to decay around you.
That is terrifying.
You are succeeding wildly in the digital fantasy of planning while failing miserably in the physical reality of living.
So, if the core problem is that we are constantly looking for a system or a method to do the actual work for us, we have to pivot and look at how we view the work itself. Why are we so desperate to avoid it? Why does it feel so heavy?
That is the million-dollar question.
And that brings us to the author's previous career, which I think is the Rosetta Stone for this entire deep dive. It's explained so much about the cognitive distortion at play.
It truly is the key to understanding her entire mental framework regarding domestic labor.
Right. Before she became a stay-at-home mom, she was a high school theater arts teacher. She was director Dana.
Okay.
And as a director, she was meticulous. She wasn't a slob at work. She says she created these incredibly perfect, detailed prop tables backstage where every single object was traced in black marker on butcher paper so you know instantly, at a glance, if a specific prop was missing.
That is highly organized.
She demanded mandatory, grueling rehearsals. She kicked actors out of the play for lack of commitment. She obsessed over making sure the hairstyles were perfectly era-appropriate for the 1940s.
Very detail-oriented.
But, and here's the paradox again, her personal school office, just a few feet away from that perfect stage, was a complete and utter disaster zone.
The contrast is striking, but it is completely 100% logical when you understand the mechanics of the project brain.
Break that down for me, because she realizes that she viewed cleaning her house exactly the same way she viewed directing a play. She viewed it as a project, and a project has a very specific, defined life cycle.
What are the phases of a project?
Well, a true project has 4 distinct phases. First, there's a planning phase, which is highly simulating.
Right.
Second, there's a massive creation and execution phase, characterized by intense focus, adrenaline, and stress. Third, there's a big, dramatic finish opening night. And fourth, crucially, there's applause. External validation.
And then?
Finality. The curtain drops, the cast party happens, the set is struck, a project ends.
Yes. She details this brutal cycle in her home life. Because she had a project brain, she would clean like an absolute maniac, but only for a specific looming goal, usually a party or hosting a holiday.
Well, I've done that.
She would map out a plan, she would sweat, stress, yell at her family, and clean until she physically dropped. The guests would arrive, she would welcome them into this pristine, beautiful, perfectly staged home, pretending it always looked like that, enjoying the compliments.
The applause phase.
Exactly. And she would swear to herself, I'm going to keep it this way this time. I have finally fixed it.
But the reality of physical entropy is always waiting in the wings.
It always is.
3 days later, disaster. She said she would walk into the kitchen, look around, and physically gasp. The clutter is fully back, dishes are piled to the ceiling, there are dirty socks on the floor.
How does that happen so fast?
She describes those 3 days between the party ending and the disaster reappearing as a literal black hole in her brain. She has no memory of the mess accumulating.
Now, I want to pose a question to you based on your earlier pushback about sensory gating and habituation. What does this black hole reveal about how we experience time and consequence?
That is exactly what I was trying to figure out. It's so incredibly odd. How does a detail-oriented, demanding theater director, a woman who will stop a rehearsal because she notices an actor's hairstyle is 10 years out of period, fail to notice 6 empty toothpaste tubes sitting on her own bathroom sink?
It's a huge blind spot.
It's like her perception of time and her vision are completely warped.
If we synthesize all the concepts we've discussed, divergent thinking, dopamine loops, sensory gating, the answer lies in the fundamental, irreconcilable difference between a project and maintenance.
Right.
As we said, projects end. Housekeeping does not. A sparkly, clean, scrubbed bathtub is a triumph for exactly 1 hour until a child takes a bath. Clean dishes are a victory only until it is time to eat lunch, which immediately creates a whole new pile of dirty dishes.
It's relentless.
Maintenance is circular, projects are linear. The project brain is neurologically wired to seek the intense dopamine hit of completion and finality.
The curtain falls, the crowd cheers, the brain gets its chemical reward.
Exactly. And during those 3 black hole days after her party, she felt she had earned a period of rest. She'd completed the project. And what is the ultimate reward for a project being successfully done?
Not having to think about it anymore. You get to walk away.
Precisely. Subconsciously, she was intentionally ignoring the mundane tasks. She wasn't just forgetting. Her brain was actively avoiding the circular work.
Oh, well.
She was letting the mess build up just enough so it could cross the threshold from a boring, daily, unrewarding chore back into a justifiable, adrenaline-pumping crisis. She needed the mess to become massive so it could qualify as a project again, because if it's a project, she can feel the rush of fixing it.
Oh, my goodness. She was manufacturing the crisis. She was creating the fire so she could feel the high of being the firefighter.
Yeah.
And, listener, think about how this applies to your life completely outside the kitchen. How often do we do this in our professional lives? Do you let your email inbox pile up to 1,000 unread messages, actively ignoring them for weeks, feeling the low-grade anxiety hum in the background, just so you can finally block out an entire Friday, put on your noise-canceling headphones, drink 3 coffees, and feel the massive, heroic rush of declaring an inbox zero day?
We all do it.
When in reality, you could have just answered 3 boring, mundane emails a day for a month and never experienced a crisis at all. We literally manufacture the crisis to feel the high of solving it.
It is a profound mechanism of self-sabotage. It is exhausting, it leads to burnout, and it is entirely unsustainable.
Totally.
And to break this cycle of manufacturing crises, the author had to embrace a reality that she initially found deeply, viscerally depressing. She had to undergo an ego death.
Which means?
She had to accept that housekeeping is not a grand theatrical project. It is not an expression of her worth. It is simply a series of boring, mundane, repetitive tasks that will never, ever end.
Which perfectly transitions us into our final segment and really the climax of her journey, dirty dishes math, and the unexpected magic of the mundane. This is the big realization. This is where the fever breaks.
The paradigm shift that makes the rest of her life possible.
She realizes that the people who have clean homes all the time, the people she used to feel deeply inferior to, the ones she thought were hoarding some secret knowledge, they aren't necessarily smarter than her. They aren't better people. They don't have a magical, elusive method she doesn't know about.
No,
They just do the boring stuff.
every single day.
She says she felt like an absolute idiot when the profound, incredibly obvious realization finally hit her. The only way to keep the dirty dishes from piling up is to actually, physically, wash the dishes.
It sounds so simplistic that it borders on insulting, especially to a highly intelligent person, but the actual mechanics behind it are revolutionary when applied to a divergent brain. Let's look closely at the concept she calls dirty dishes math.
Okay, this part blew my mind because it removes the emotion and just makes it about numbers. She breaks it down.
Walk us through the math.
If you wait for the dishes to become a project, meaning you wait 3 or 4 days until every dish in the house is dirty, washing them takes hours.
Right.
It requires extensive hand washing because the dishwasher is full. It requires finagling space, shifting precarious piles around the counters to find an inch of room, and usually ends in a tearful mental breakdown because the physical friction is so high.
But if you do them daily.
If you do them daily, it is literally just yesterday's dishes. It's 10 plates, 12 glasses, a few coffee cups, and a pasta pot. Everything fits cleanly in exactly one load.
And what is the actual measured time cost of that one single load?
She timed it. She used a stopwatch. It takes exactly 5 minutes to unload the clean stuff from the morning and exactly 5 minutes to reload the dirty stuff from the day. 10 minutes total.
10 minutes.
But if you wait just 2 days, the math breaks entirely. It doesn't take 20 minutes. Because you run out of physical space in the dishwasher, you are forced to start hand washing. Because you are hand washing, you need counter space for a drying rack, which you don't have because it's covered in dirty dishes. 2 days worth of dishes takes exponentially longer than 20 minutes.
It's not a linear progression. It was exponential decay. The physical environment degrades at an accelerating rate the longer you wait.
I feel such an immense wave of relief for the listener hearing this, because the underlying message isn't, you need to change your entire personality, rewire your divergent brain, and become a completely different, rigid, type A person.
No, not at all.
It's just math.
Yes.
It is exactly like compounding interest on a high-interest credit card. If you pay the daily balance, it's a few bucks, it's easy, it takes seconds on an app. But if you let it sit, suddenly you are paying interest on the interest. You're paying a massive, punishing penalty strictly for the time elapsed. The mess compounds.
That is a brilliant analogy. The friction compounds. But here's the ultimate plot twist of the entire text. We have spent this whole time talking about the creative divergent brain versus the mundane linear tasks.
Right.
The author initially harbored a deep existential fear that giving up her grand projects, surrendering to these boring 10-minute daily tasks, would slowly kill her creative spirit. She thought adopting a routine would crush her soul and make her a boring person.
But the exact opposite happened.
The absolute opposite. When the dishes are done every single day in 10 minutes, it fundamentally prevents the massive, exhausting, weekend-ruining cleaning projects.
Yes. She notes this beautiful magical irony. Embracing the boring daily maintenance is the exact mechanism that actually buys you the time and the mental bandwidth to do the real projects you genuinely love.
Exactly.
Because she is no longer spending 8 hours on a Saturday excavating her kitchen sink like an archaeologist, she suddenly has the time and the energy to paint bathrooms, to write books, to plant elaborate gardens in the backyard with her kids.
By surrendering to the mundane, she unlocked the capacity for the extraordinary. The daily discipline didn't kill her creativity, it funded it. It gave her the baseline stability required to actually execute her divergent ideas.
What an incredible place to land. Let's just take a breath and wrap up the journey we've been on today in this deep dive.
It's been quite a journey.
We started with a listener who might be living in a fairy tale delusion, waiting for the magic prince of organization to arrive and fix everything. We talked about shedding the toxic, paralyzing pursuit of the very best way and the absurdity of air-drying dishes for months.
We recognize the absolute danger of the project brain that manufactures chaotic crises just to feel a dopamine rush.
And finally, we found immense, tangible freedom in the boring 10-minute daily math of simply doing the dishes.
It is a profound journey from fantasy to reality, and it turns out that reality, while admittedly boring at times, is actually where true freedom lives.
So true.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a broader, more penetrating question to mull over. We have talked almost exclusively about houses, kitchens, and dirty dishes today, but I want you to look at the rest of your life.
Okay.
Are there other areas, perhaps your career trajectory, your marriage, your physical health, your deep friendships, that you are secretly treating as a project to be dramatically conquered, finished, and walked away from?
Yeah.
When in reality, those things are living, breathing ecosystems that just require 10 minutes of boring, mundane, beautiful maintenance every single day.
Oh, that is a heavy, necessary thought to sit with.
Oh.
Are you waiting for a project, or are you maintaining the reality?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We enthusiastically encourage you to take a fresh look at your own piles today, whether they are stacks of dirty dishes, physical papers, or just those aspirational ideas cluttering up your brain, and tackle them not as a perfect grand project, but just as today's reality. See you next time.